Hi there. I don't know if you can tell where I am, but maybe the vista will reveal itself. I'm actually sitting just off the bike path in Franconia Notch. It's still a little snowed in and there's no travel, of course, but I wanted to come to this route on the way to the Old Man Historic Center to begin what I hope is a journey you will find interesting. That is, I'm here in a place where we come to celebrate a symbol of something that is no longer seen, but something that we keep in our memory. And I want to begin actually a multiple part reading, consider it an audiobook, of Annie Trumbull Slosson's great story applicable to this season of White Christopher. It also attests to the fact that there are symbols all around us which are unseen, but nevertheless are full of portent and meaning if we know them. I hope you enjoy. You can shut off the video and maybe just listen to the story. Thanks. The first time I saw Christopher Bowles, but his name wasn't Christopher then, he was only 2 or 3 weeks old. Seemed to me at the time, as it does now as I recollect back, that he looked more like a little white rabbit than anything else. His hair, and there was a good deal of it, was most white as snow, and his eyelashes and eyebrows the same. And his eyes were sort of pink, or you might say brownish, with pink showing through, exactly like that rabbit's eyes over at the Noiseway. I suppose he was what they call an albino, though I never saw any other, but folks said he was that kind. I lived quite a piece away from the Bowles family, Cyrus Bowles, I mean. They were up on Wallace Hill Road then, and I was where I am now, on the way to Lisbon. Charlotte Bowles and I went to school together when she was Charlotte Streeter, and we grew up great friends. And I'd known Cyrus's folks, too, all my life. They were all Franconia people, both sides, born and raised here. Charlotte didn't know exactly whether to be pleased with her little white baby's looks or not, but she loved him hard from the minute he came. I didn't know what to say about him either. He wasn't like any baby I'd ever seen before, and he didn't favor any of his relations. He wasn't what you'd call pretty, but he was cunning, so little and white with those pinky brown eyes. The child lived and grew and did well enough as far as his health went. But it wasn't many weeks before we all saw that there was something wrong, or at any rate out of the common, about the boy. The pinky eyes didn't see very well, and after a spell we found that though he appeared to hear well enough, he couldn't talk. And worse than that, there was something wrong about the mind. We never called him, even to ourselves, an idiot. That seems such a dreadful word. He was his mother's only child, and she loved him more than tongue can tell. But I suppose perhaps he was a kind of one. Strangers called him that, I do know. Cyrus and Charlotte didn't name the child at first. They kept putting it off and putting it off, not exactly knowing what he was going to turn out, hoping and hoping he'd improve and be like other children. They called him Baby for a long time, and when he got too big for that, he was the little boy, and after that, just the boy. And he went on being that, even to the folks all around there. So he never had any real name, a first name, none of his own, till he was more than 12 years old. I told you he was kind of cunning looking when he was a baby, though never real pretty. But as he got older and bigger, he wasn't nice looking at all. He was dreadfully thin, and always so pale, not a bit of color in his face anywheres. His hair was as white as an old man's, and so were those eyebrows and eyelashes. His eyes didn't see much. He kept them half shut up, and what you could see of them had such a dead, dull sort of look. Fact is, there wasn't much life of any kind in the poor boy. He was dead and dull, inside and out. He never went out much, never played or ran about like the other boys. He used to sit at the back door, generally on the steps, still and quiet, hour after hour, day after day. Most times he didn't seem to be looking at anything, his eyes generally half shut up and dead-looking, and he had such a miserable, unhappy look on his face. Folks were sorry for him, and never unkind to him, but nobody loved him much nor wanted him around, except his father and mother, his mother most, of course. Cyrus was fond of him, naturally, for he was his own child, his first one and his last, for they never had another. But he was disappointed and a bit ashamed, and didn't always like to be reminded of that by seeing the boy around. Men are like that, you know, most of them, a little more than women, maybe. But his mother, she was wrapped up in the boy. Sometimes I thought she set more by him than if he had been a rugged, pretty child to be showed off and proud of. She made so much of him, and kept him always clean and nicely dressed. She used to have such a loving, motherly look on her face when she looked at him, and when she didn't know anyone else saw her, she'd put her 2 arms around him and draw him up to her close and tight, and often kiss his white, pinched little face. He didn't take much to being coddled, though, and hardly ever showed any signs of loving his mother or anyone else. By spells, there'd come a kind of half-troubled, considering, longing look in his pinky brown eyes when Charlotte held him tight, most as if there was some real love in his dead little heart, only he didn't know how to bring it out. But Charlotte was the only one that appeared to notice that much and understand it. He never cared for creatures, and they seemed to know it. Dogs and cats, the horses and cows, even the cosset lambs just kept away from him, knowing fast enough, as animals will, you know, that he didn't want them or feel any interest in them. Cyrus and Charlotte were good, religious folks, both professors from the time they were a boy and girl and joined the church the same Sunday. So they tried their best to bring the boy up in the fear of the Lord. But what could they do? You couldn't seem to get any idea of any kind into that poor, stupid head. He knew when he was hungry or thirsty or wanted anything, and had his own way of letting folks know, but that was all. As for learning him about right and wrong, and minding, showing respect to his father and mother, being thankful or kind or merciful, why, it appeared that you just couldn't do it. And so, of course, to put anything into his mind about God and heaven, rewarding and punishing, forgiving and all, was just impossible. That couldn't be done at all. But they tried. Especially Charlotte. She'd tell him the story in the Gospels over and over and over. I've heard her myself, and it made me cry. 'Twould have made you or anybody. It's a story, anyway, that you never quite get used to, however many times you hear it. And, oh, to listen to her, to listen to that poor woman telling it from the very beginning, down to the mournful, sorrowful end, telling it in easy little words, so plain and simple, her voice shaky and her eyes wet, 'twas the most moving thing. But the boy sat there, not appearing to hear one word or take a mite of notice, his eyes just as dead and dull as ever, his face as cross and stupid-looking. They had a big Bible with large print and lots of pictures of scripture scenes. Noah and the ark, and Cain killing Abel, Daniel and the lions, and all that. And in the New Testament there was the manger and the baby, the boy in the temple, and then all those last dreadful events pictured out to most break your heart. And Charlotte would hold that Bible in her lap for hours, trying to call the boy's attention to it, pointing to the pictures and telling him about them, most of all about the New Testament ones and that mournful thing that happened so long ago, that thing that means so much to all of us now. But the boy never took any notice of the pictures any more as if they weren't there. Didn't appear to see them at all. It was sort of dreadful to watch his stupid face and dead, blind-looking eyes, and at the same time see his mother's features all shining with that story, her voice shaky and her eyes wet as she told the same thing over and over and over. I don't know as I've given you much idea of the Bowles boy after all, as he was right along from a baby up to 12 years old when the change that you might have asked me about took place. But it's the best I can do. A poor, half-witted boy that might as well be dead, living far from comfort or help to anyone, not having any pleasure in life himself, not really bad or cruel, but surely not good or loving. Not that, anyway, except for those little quick spells, which seemed to come over him once in a while and light him up. You might say, as if there was something bright and warm inside, if you could only keep it burning. But it went out so quick, and only a few people ever saw it at all or made anything of it at any rate. But his mother always caught at that, or any other sign of the soul she was certain was there if she could just get at it or wake it up. She's told me time and time again about the little things nobody but a mother would take notice of that showed, she thought, that her poor boy understood and felt and hoped and wished and loved, most like other folks' boys, only all inside, not out. Poor Charlotte. She had to own that it was most generally in his sleep that the child showed these signs. She'd go to him nights to see if he was covered up or something, and she'd see, or so she said, such a beautiful, live, understanding look on his features as he lay there asleep, as though, even if it was only when he was dreaming, he knew all about things and was perfectly satisfied. It most seems, says she, telling me about it once, as if my boy was more awake when he's asleep than when he wakes up, though that sounds like a riddle. I saw him that way once myself, but never but once. Charlotte took me into his room one evening when I was over there, and I must say I was all upset for a minute to see the boy. He had a real interested, enjoying, but still look, most as if he was seeing or listening to something beautiful. And Charlotte, as I said before, caught at every single little thing like that, as mothers do and always have from Scripture days, and kept all those sayings or doings in her heart. Now, as to what came afterwards, I can't explain it, and I don't pretend I can. It's been talked about and thought about and written about by wiser folks than me, for it made a great deal of talk in those days, many years ago it is now. There have been all different ways of accounting for it, but I don't know as any one of them is exactly satisfying to me. I just settle down again after reading or listening to those ideas and reasonings to my old conclusion, and what you heard me say today. It happened anyway, and somebody made it happen. That's enough for me. How 'twas made to happen, and what means were taken to bring it all about, I don't know, and I won't try to guess. But what anybody in this world could see of the whole body in this world, could see of the whole thing I saw. For as I told you before, I was a great friend of the family, and I knew that boy from the time he was a little baby to the very end. And I will tell you all that I know.